The night was as black as the inside of a coffin, and a biting wind howled through the twisted trees that lined the deserted road. Angela's heart raced as she clutched the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the pale glow of the dashboard lights. She had taken a wrong turn on her way to visit her grandmother's remote cabin deep in the woods, and now she found herself on a desolate, unfamiliar path. The darkness seemed to close in around her, and her headlights only revealed a narrow tunnel of road ahead. She could barely make out the overgrown forest on either side, the trees reaching out like skeletal fingers. Her phone had no signal, and her GPS was utterly useless in this forsaken place. As Angela continued down the winding road, she spotted a dim light in the distance. A sense of relief washed over her, and she accelerated towards it. Maybe it was a gas station, a cabin, or some other sign of civilization. But as she drew nearer, she realized the light wasn't coming from a building. It was a single flickering lantern hanging from a gnarled tree, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Her car sputtered to a halt just in front of the lantern. Angela's heart pounded in her chest as she peered into the inky darkness, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. She could feel an unsettling presence, an unseen force watching her every move. Terrified but desperate, Angela reluctantly stepped out of her car and approached the lantern. The wind carried a faint, haunting melody that seemed to beckon her deeper into the woods. Her grandmother's cabin and her waiting warmth and safety were fading from her mind as she ventured into the shadows. With each step, the forest grew denser and more menacing. Twisted branches reached out to grab at her, and the ground beneath her feet felt like quicksand, pulling her down into the earth. The lantern's light seemed to dance and taunt her, leading her further into the heart of the wilderness. Suddenly, a bone-chilling voice echoed through the trees, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You should not be here," it hissed, sending shivers down Angela's spine. She tried to call out, but her voice caught in her throat. The lantern's flame grew brighter, illuminating a clearing in the forest. Angela's heart leaped into her throat as she saw a circle of figures, hooded and cloaked in tattered black robes. They stood around a large, gnarled tree, their faces hidden in the shadows. In the center of the circle, a woman with flowing white hair and piercing blue eyes held a sinister-looking knife. Before Angela could react, the woman began to chant in a language she couldn't understand. The hooded figures swayed in unison, their chants growing louder and more frenzied. The air grew colder, and Angela's breath misted before her. Panicking, Angela tried to flee, but an invisible force held her in place. She watched in horror as the woman raised the knife high and brought it down, slicing into the tree's gnarled bark. A dark, crimson liquid oozed from the wound, and the ground shook beneath her. The figures in the circle let out a guttural, otherworldly cry, and the forest itself seemed to come alive. The trees writhed and moaned, their branches twisting and contorting. Shadows enveloped Angela, and the world around her transformed into a nightmare. She realized too late that she had stumbled into something far more sinister and ancient than she could have ever imagined. The forest had claimed her, and as the darkness closed in, the nightmarish horrors that lurked within its depths would ensure that she would never be seen again. The world outside would forget her. Her name would be whispered only in the darkest of tales, and her fate would become another grim chapter in the haunted history of the Cursed Woods.